The harsh truth of starting a reptile business is that it doesn't matter if you have 20 years keeping reptiles or if you have 20 years running successful businesses. When you come into the ball python hobby, no matter what, there's going to be countless things that you are not good at. And if you don't find a way to improve on these skills, on these knowledge bases, you will run into the situation where you make a bunch of mistakes and it very likely can result in you getting out of the reptile business entirely. So for this week's video, we're going to talk about all of the different things that I think you need to know in order to have a successful reptile business. My name's Steven with Leviathan, and let's get to it. We take quite a bit of our pictures for Instagram as handheld snake photos. And when it comes to Instagram, I think that while having consistency and having a style is really, really good, it does make the images kind of blend together and people can kind of forget that they are seeing a brand new picture because it can look so similar to all of the other pictures that you post. So for today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and we are going to be setting up the living room as a flat lay photo studio, and then we're going to be taking some snake pictures. So I have organized this video into three major sections, and that is skills and knowledge related to the animals, skills and knowledge related to the reptile market overall, and skills and knowledge related to business overall. So for the first section, we're going to talk about the animals. And in order to have a successful reptile business, you have to have a complete understanding of all of the husbandry going into the species that you are breeding. Because if you don't know how to take care of those animals, it's very unlikely that you will even be able to raise up the animals into adulthood and successfully breed them. In addition, when it comes to the reptile hobby, for a large portion of the hobby, we are selling to pet owners. And oftentimes these pet owners don't have a lot of knowledge with the animals, so we have to be able as breeders to give them the advice that they need in order to care for their animals successfully. So you have to have a solid understanding of how to care for the species that you are breeding, so that way both you can raise up your animals successfully and you can inform your customers and help guide them through their journey on keeping the reptile that you breed. In addition to the basic husbandry to care for the animals, there's also a lot of breeding knowledge that you need for your species. So going for ball pythons, because that's what we breed, we need to know how old and how big do the animals need to be before we can pair them. How exactly do we pair them? What does a lock look like? How do we know if an animal is actually gravid with eggs and they're going to produce a clutch? How do we know when they are going to produce that clutch, so that way we can take those eggs and incubate them ourselves to make sure they have the best chance to hatch out? How do we incubate the eggs? What temperatures do we need? What humidities do we need in order to both care for the eggs and care for the animals overall? And there are, it seems like, a countless list of things that you need to be able to understand just to successfully breed the animals. And depending on the species, this list of things can be really, really difficult. So ball pythons are fairly easy compared to a lot of the other reptile species. But if you are getting into something more complex, because there's less competition in it, that might mean that you are going to have a harder learning curve and that you might not be successful because you might not have enough knowledge to successfully breed that species. In addition to essentially the how to breed and how to care for the animals, you have to be able to understand the genetics that are at play, both for the given species. So if we're talking about ball pythons, the morphs. What do all of the different morphs do, and how do you combine them together in order to create amazing offspring? And are there specific morphs, and are there specific combinations that you should stay away from, and why should you stay away from them? That knowledge base is something that you have to gain over time, and it can be really, really overwhelming overwhelming to somebody who is a new breeder because there is so much to learn. In addition to just simply the morphs and genetics for your species, understanding how the morphs and how the genetics are inherited into the babies is critical in order for you to develop a breeding strategy that you can use in order to establish your entire ball python or other reptile breeding operation. So when it comes to the inheritance side, you need to be able to understand what genes are dominant, what genes are incomplete dominant, what are recessive, how exactly do those work together, and what are the odds when you're trying to make pairings for specific combinations given all of the genes, so that way you can plan how many clutches you should need to have in order to hit the desired outcome. Leading off of that, I think that the idea of understanding statistics and probability is so important in the ball python breeding hobby, or again, any reptile breeding hobby, because the knowledge of probability and the knowledge of statistics will be able to let you get a little bit further, so that way you're not just simply looking at a double het to double het pairing has a 1 in 16 chance of producing a double visual per egg, and instead that you can go further, and if you understand probability, you can take that 1 in 16 chance per egg and extrapolate it to know how many eggs do you need before you can get a roughly 80% chance that you will have hit at least one double visual, because that information is going to be much more helpful when you are planning out exactly how many holdbacks do you need, or how many females do you need to purchase, and how many clutches do you need to produce in any given project in order to hit the desired result. So this girl is a butter mystic female that we just hatched out, and she is actually from our very first clutch of 2025, and she is going to be our model. So I'm going to bring her over to our photo shoot, and from here I actually removed the bit of cork bark because I felt like it was just cluttering up the scene, and I want the attention focused on the snake. So we got her down right here just in the middle of our scene, and I am gonna go ahead and get the flash and camera on, and I'm gonna kind of set my frame up, and I'm just gonna take one with her right in the middle at first, and then I'm gonna do a little bit different placement. So there's our first picture. It's pretty even lighting, but again, I think that it's just a little bit too bright. So I'm going to bring down our ISO, and I'm gonna bring up our aperture. Oh, she's trying to escape on us. So here, let me go ahead and grab her and bring her back. She actually, oh, she was focused on my butt. Oh no, that's for OnlyFans. All right, so there we go. We got her all ready. Oh, she's trying to escape again. There we go. Gonna have her right there. I'm gonna go ahead and focus on her. Gonna move my hand, and now they're just a bit too dark, so again, I am brand new to flash photography, so still trying to figure out exactly the settings that we want to use. All right, so, and better, and we can always up that, increase the exposure in our editing software afterwards, but I'm pretty happy with that one. I'm still gonna brighten up just a little bit. I think that actually what the issue is that with the light coming from all over on the ceiling, it's not quite creating the shadows that I want, and that it is overall making it feel a little flat. But overall, it is a good image. Moving away from the animals, and I want to go over to the business side. So there's lots of different things that you need to know from the business side, and this is one area that I think a lot of people's day jobs or their careers can help out. So when it comes to the business itself, I think that some of the most important skills that you can have when you're starting a reptile business are sales skills and marketing skills, because if you can't find a way to get people to want to buy from you, you are going to have a very difficult time selling your animals. And if you can't sell your animals for either the prices that you think they should go for or fast enough, you can get crushed by all of the expenses that are involved with operating a reptile business, to the point that you decide to get out of the breeding hobby entirely. So I think that being able to understand both how can you sell things and what are tips and tricks and strategies for selling things in person as well as online is a really, really core, critical aspect to having a successful reptile business that comes right behind actually caring for the animals themselves. Related to sales, but not necessarily the same thing, I think that marketing is a huge bonus for anybody who comes into the reptile hobby, because if you are able to effectively market your brand and effectively market your animals, your projects, you are going to have an easier time selling those animals once you are able to produce them. But there are so many subcategories of marketing. I think that in order to have a decent shot at it right now in 2025, you probably need to be fairly well versed in social media and photography and videography and lots of other things like that. And this doesn't even hit on things like paid ads, whether this is on Facebook or Google or anything. And these skill sets are stuff that it takes people entire careers to develop. But if you want to have a successful reptile business, I think that especially in 2025, these are non-negotiables. Beyond the sales and marketing side, bookkeeping is a super important part of the reptile business, both in tracking your expenses and tracking your income, because if you're going to be doing this legitimately, you're going to need to treat it legitimately, which involves filing taxes. And while a lot of people don't necessarily need to know exactly what you can deduct and how much you can deduct it for, the idea that you are structuring and tracking all of this information for every single purchase and every single sale is going to be super, super important if you hire an accountant, because it's that information that's going to allow them to know exactly how much you actually owe or should get back when it comes tax season time. The last big area on the general business stuff is that there are a ton of laws and there are a ton of regulations, depending on your state, depending on your county, depending on your city, that are applicable to running an animal business. So knowing what are the things that you can and can't do given your state is super, super important, because you don't want to run into a situation where, because you just simply did not know, get fined thousands and thousands of dollars because you were doing something illegally. Or in a worst case scenario, you could have a situation where you have animals that you weren't actually allowed to have given wherever you live, and those animals could be confiscated and euthanized. So that way, not only have you lost all of the investment that you've made into them, but you have cost those animals their lives, which is not something that anybody wants to have happen, simply because you did not know the laws and regulations for the area that you lived in. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to come at it from a slightly different angle, and I'm going to take a picture like this. That's a much, much better picture, and I'm super excited about that one. And again, you can see how important having shadows in your images are, because it creates the depth, and that is something that I really like. I really like that picture. So I'm going to grab her again, put her back into the middle, and then we'll see if we can get one more picture before we put her back and let her calm down. Again, I really like that. She did kind of take away a lot of our debris, so I'm going to move this. Again, I very much like that, getting not quite directly above them, but at the side so we can still see a bit of that shadow. But overall, she did great. So I'm going to go ahead and set the camera down. I'll show her off just one more time, and then we'll go put her back in her enclosure, and we'll get this all set up. Then Courtney and I are going to go get some lunch. The last area of knowledge that you need to develop as a new reptile breeder is, in my opinion, one of the hardest things to develop because it takes years of experience of both breeding and selling your animals, as well as watching the market nearly every single day to understand what projects are selling, why they're selling for those amounts, and where the demand is. Because when it comes to building up a reptile breeding operation, in order to do it well, you need to be able to anticipate where the hobby is going in the next 3 to 5 years. And if you can successfully anticipate where the hobby is going in the next 3 to 5 years, it's likely that you will be able to position yourself to produce clutches and animals for the projects that are most in demand at that given time. So therefore you will have the easiest time selling your animals and you can sell them for the highest prices. But if you're not careful with this, it is very possible and very common for people to buy projects that are super hot and super in demand right now, but then 3 to 5 years from now, once the reptile breeder is able to produce animals in that project, the hype has died down, the supply has increased drastically, and the demand for that project isn't there anymore because all of the people who are interested in it had already bought their animals. So this results in a situation where those newer breeders who bought in during the height and peak interest for that project paid really high prices, but then when it comes time to sell the babies in that project, the prices have fallen dramatically. And with this, it can again lead to situations where people feel like that they have been scammed, that the ball python or reptile hobby overall is too volatile, and it can lead to them getting out of the hobby before it got to the point where they were really going and found traction and were able to actually establish a reptile business. So this is a really long way to say that it is critical that as a new breeder, you learn how to analyze projects, not just your own, but other projects, and understand both historically and in the future why the market reacted the way that it did or will to a given project at any given time. And once you get really good at this, but again, you're still making guesses, you will be able to make better investment decisions, and you will be able to maximize the limited amount of space and limited amount of time that you have in order to breed your animals. Anyways, I know that there was a ton of really shallow information given in this video, but the purpose of it was not necessarily to go into a deep dive on any given topic, but talk about all of the different things that I think is critical to know as a new reptile breeder. We hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, please don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe, but we will see you next week.